Hey YouTube, Professor Peglin is back again. Class is once more in session. You can call me Old Man Sethis, but I am here to help you learn the ways of this wonderful game. What are we talking about today, you ask? Today we will be talking about area of effect orbs. Are they good? Are they bad? Which one's the best? Which one is the worst? Obviously, a lot of these are subjective, but when it comes down to it, some of them are definitely better than others. So we are going to go over the pros and cons of all of them, and at the very end of this video, we are going to talk about which one I believe probably has the most utility and probably works the best no matter what happens with you when you're playing this game, all the way up through the current Crucible 7. So without further ado, let's get to it. We are going to talk about the Bouldorb. We are going to talk about the Poltorbgeist. We're going to talk about the Icircle. We're going to talk about the Sphere, and we are also going to talk about my personal favorite, Ohmygorb. Let's go ahead and get to it, everybody. I wanted to show you all that we're going in on Crucible 7. We will be tossing each one of these orbs a couple different times so you can see their different effects, but I wanted to make sure that you all understood that I'm coming at you with information gleaned from basically me playing on this higher difficulty most of the time. Let's get to it. We're going to start with the Bouldorb. Let's see what this bad boy's got. All right, here we are, everybody. Our first round of ball tossing, as it were. We are going to be starting with the Bouldorb, and it looks like we've actually lucked into a pretty good map for this particular primer, as we don't have any flying enemies. So we're going to go over really quick what the different upgrades do on this bad boy, what its really big pros and cons are as you make progress through it, and whether or not it could be worth it for you as you make progress in the game. Big shout out to the Thunderstorm mod manager. They actually have an awesome mod system. If you ever wanted to play around with this game, go check it out. They will definitely have some really cool mods on there if you really want to build your deck a certain way. This is why you're actually able to see that I have Bouldorb level 3, 2, and 1 here, and we're able to actually talk about this. The Bouldorb. The Bouldorb is a good area of effect orb. You can see everything it does. It's big. It attacks, pierces all enemies. Now, the downside is it can only hit ground enemies. That is definitely a very big con. Though, probably worth it when it comes right down to it. And the reason being is most enemies in this game are actually ground-oriented. Is the only hits ground enemies that big of a deal for the Bouldorb? In my estimation, not really. But do you want to rely on this orb only? Obviously not. It's not going to be one that's going to be able to carry you all the way to the promised land if for whatever reason you find yourself only carrying them around. So when you're getting the Bouldorb, consider where you're at, what you're doing. Don't be afraid to upgrade this one. Its damage gets pretty good. It starts out at 2 regular, 4 crit. You're looking at an upgrade to 3 normal, 6 crit, and then finally 4-8 on the very last level. Is this worth it? In my estimation, absolutely. This can help you out immensely with one of the mole boss in the first area. It will help you out immensely with the crossbow boss in the second area. And you can definitely make a lot of, you can cause a lot of havoc with this one, because when it comes to making sure that you're hitting the boss every time, this one's going to do you really well. And obviously, if you're going to upgrade it at least once, the chances you're going to do great damage are pretty good. Now, here are the big cons. We're going to go ahead and throw the orb a couple times. We're going to see a couple cons. Even with this level 3, we're going to throw this, and you're going to see already, if we're looking at the arc is very low. It can be very hard to hit certain pegs with the Bouldorb. On certain maps, the pegs are so tightly put together that it's really hard to aim. You can't even see the aim cursor because you basically just hit a peg immediately, and you aren't really sure which way you're aiming. So keep that in mind if you do decide to take this one. The other big problem here, and I think that you're all going to see it really quick, is that it doesn't really bounce when we throw it. You can see it. It's very, very, very heavy, just like it says. Now, is this a good thing in some cases? For sure. Like you just saw right there, we were able to proc a bomb immediately. You're going to see that we're going to kill everything. Not really that big of a deal, right? So sometimes heavy can be very, very good. Other times it can be very, very bad. This is something you need to consider with the Bouldorb as you make progress in the game. You are going to find yourself sometimes not being able to hit a refresh with a Bouldorb, so you're going to have to think about the other orbs that might actually allow you to do that. Ultimately, is this orb worth it? Absolutely. You can almost fit this in any deck, but it does have significant drawbacks and things that you're going to have to consider as you make progress in the game, especially as you're in Crucible 7. If we were to, for example, clear out all of these pegs here in the middle, this would actually be a lot more difficult. Now, we're going to kill this, but I'm going to wait to actually make progress here in a second. I wanted you to be able to look at this really quick. If we were in a higher level and there were a lot more enemies or they had more health and it was going to take longer to kill them, This could actually be a really bad thing. If all of these were knocked out, using the Bouldorb to hit any of these out here on the outside could be a much more difficult proposition. So you've got to make sure that you have tools to hit refreshes in other spots to make sure you can continue to make the Bouldorb useful. This is going to be something that some people may actually fall into a trap, and that is going to end up very, very bad for them. Keep that in mind as you make progress and you're deciding, okay, which area of effect orbs do I want? Which one might actually work out with me? It's a very good orb. It really, really, really does some solid work, especially again, because most of the enemies in the game are ground oriented. But if you are dealing with any flyers, you've got to make sure that you watch when you toss it. Only hit one enemy. Could it be worth it? Could it be worth the pegs you're gonna hit? Are the enemies that are actually flying gonna make it to you and start causing you damage? Ask yourself these questions as you make progress in Peglin and make sure that you slot these in the right way. So I would say at max 1, maybe 2 Bouldorbs in any kind of deck, unless you're doing an Orbalisk build, which that will be a different YouTube video. It is a good orb. It definitely has some problems. The next orb we're going to talk about is the Poltorbgeist, one of my personal favorites and one that can carry you all the way to the end of the game if you play your cards right. And we're back, class. Here we are with our section on the Poltorbgeist, one of my personal favorite area of effect orbs. This one also has some significant drawback as well. We're going to talk about a little bit of that right here. The Poltorbgeist. Is it good? Is it bad? Good. It hits everything on the screen. It doesn't matter if it's on the ground. It doesn't matter if it's in the air. No matter what happens, this orb will be doing damage every time you toss it. And that is a very, very, very beneficial thing as you make progress in this game. So if you can look at it already, it says attacks all enemies. That means ground and air. And the other really cool thing about this orb is the fact that it can pass through pegs as it travels upward. This is something that becomes incredibly beneficial as you make progress through the Crucible levels of this game. We all know eventually you're going to start losing your access to refresh pegs and crit pegs. Sometimes those pegs are going to be above you somewhere, and you're going to need a way to hit it. What better way to do it than with this bad boy? The Poltorbgeist, no matter what happens, can get to anything above it. So we're going to kind of imagine here that if we were firing down in here, let's say that there was a refresh peg somewhere up here. Let's say our refresh peg was, I don't know, right about right where this arc is. And let's say there's a bunch of pegs in the middle if we were in the web level, for example. This would actually be able to cruise all the way through it and hit that refresh. Let's say you've knocked out all the pegs down here. This is going to be a very good tool for you to actually hit that and give yourself your damage back so that you can deal with all the enemies. This is one of the biggest utilities for this, and this is actually one of its biggest selling points to carry you all the way to the end of the game. Let's talk about damage really quick. The damage of the Poltorbgeist. Is it good? Not really. The Poltorbgeist is definitely going to be an orb that will be able to, on its own, carry a lot of runs for you, but getting other things to help it, anything that increases its damage, going to be very helpful, whether it's its basic damage or its crit damage. You can see already, basic damage for the Poltorbgeist is only 1/2 on a crit. Its first upgrade only increases both by 1, so you're looking at 2/3 on the first upgrade. Where you really want to get it is that last upgrade, because on the last upgrade, you actually get 5 per crit. This is unmodified. Obviously, if you have anything that gives you any kind of bonus to that, Sealed Conviction, I want to call it the balance or whatever it is, every time you reload, you get plus X for the reload, so it would be +1 on your first, it'd be +2 on the next. Anything that actually increases that damage is going to be very helpful and is going to make this orb an absolute powerhouse. That being said, it is still incredibly useful on its own. This is definitely an orb that you can get away with having a few in your deck just because of its utility of being able to hit so many things. We're actually going to do the crit. Why are we going to do the crit? Because if we get the crit, we're immediately doing more damage. And we know that this thing's going to sail up. We're going to have a lot of momentum. So the chances that we hit a few pegs over here are really good. We're going to hit more on the way back down. If we get lucky, maybe we see it bounce off of this peg right here and come back up through this one. It could really turn into a hell of a damage dealer just by virtue of watching it bounce up and through and actually kill other pegs. But let's go ahead and take a look at this shot really quick. Let's go ahead and see what we get. See, already looking really good. We're getting a lot back. Not really too bad. 33 points of damage. It's a level 2 orb. Not really too bad as our first one. Could have been a lot better. If this was a more densely packed pegboard, that would have been a lot more damage, hands down. So as you can see already, that bounce up, incredibly, incredibly useful as you make progress. The other spot you could use this and make really good progress is, let's say this bomb had more pegs on top of it. This bomb had more pegs on top of it. We would get so much value of hitting this bomb right now and making it sail through a bunch of damage on top of it. So a really cool thing when it comes to the Poltorbgeist is, again, that ability to do that. It's definitely not a detriment. It's something you need to think about and realize is an absolutely positively fantastic tool as you make progress in the game. Let's go ahead and take a look at this one in action really fast. So let's do it like about right here. We're gonna kind of hope that it's gonna sail off in this direction and maybe get a few of those pegs over here on the left side of the screen, or it may not. Yeah, unfortunately it didn't, but as you can see, still pretty good. Not bad damage at all. We're getting pretty good damage as it comes back up. Getting that refresh is huge. We did 60 points of damage just from the orb alone. Had we not hit the bomb, it still would have wiped out most of the enemy team. So pretty good. You can see that the Poltorbgeist, again, very good. Now let's talk about a couple cons really fast. Low damage. We already talked about it. The fact that this doesn't do a whole lot of damage is definitely a little bit rough, as everything's life is going to start getting higher and higher. So again, it's going to be very important that you kind of augment it and make sure it can do more damage as time goes on. Another big problem with this particular orb is the fact that it's going to be really detrimental against some bosses. You don't really want to use this one all that often in a particular boss fight unless it's a boss fight with multiple enemies, such as the mole or the ballista in the second area, because there it actually has some value. You actually do want to hit the different enemies that are coming out, because that's the only way for you to get the trash out of the way to hit the main target. Lastly, the ability of the Poltorbgeist to go up can actually hurt you in some cases. And in that case, it's going to be, let's say, for example, you have the gift that keeps on giving. The gift that keeps on giving allows you to hit pegs multiple times, basically stacking damage. But if you hit those durable pegs as it goes up, it actually wipes them out in one hit and you don't get that extra damage. These are things that you must consider when you're building your deck, getting the relics that you have, and wondering, is the Poltorbgeist going to be right for me? Now, the next orb we're going to take a look at is the Icircle. Definitely an orb that has a lot of utility, and definitely an orb that can save your bacon in a lot of cases. And we're back, class, with the Icircle. Big pros of the Icircle. A lot of damage. Pierces right off the bat. Doesn't hit every enemy, though. So this is something that you have to consider when using this bad boy. So at level 1, 2-4 damage. Pretty good, pretty devastating early on in the game. Level 2, 3-6, as you can see what the upgrade structure is, you would be right by saying, Professor Peglin, is level 3 going to be 4-8? Absolutely. That's exactly how they're going to do it. Definitely one that helps you take out multiple threats, and this is something that's very important in this game again, because single targeting in this game is going to be incredibly detrimental unless you have an artifact like the Overwhammer. Do you want Icircles? Icircles are very good. Icircles you may only want one of, and the reason being is because the only way you can hit every enemy on the board is if you actually get a crit. Is this a problem in the game? Not at first, but as you make progress, again, we talked about it earlier, you only eventually get one refresh and one crit right off the bat in level 7 of Crucible. So if you don't have access to those, or if you don't have the artifacts that, let's say, every refresh is a crit, or if you have a crit-a-ball, this particular one can start losing its effectiveness relatively quickly. Now, that being said, one of the things that it can do very well is get to those refreshes or those crits. One of this orb's very big attributes is the fact that it can actually pierce the first peg. This is something that can be utilized later on to help set yourself up for success. So, is the Icircle going to be the crux of your damage in the long run? Probably not. It's probably going to do a pretty good job of doing some pretty good damage, especially early, but as you hit the mid and late game, you're going to want this utility to help get yourself more refreshes and potentially be able to crit with it in times where it's actually convenient. As you can see right now, the fact that we could shoot this and hit the bomb right away to set ourselves up for another shot, this is really good. This is one of the Icircle's really cool utility abilities. So it stands on its own as an area of effect damager, but being able to hit things later on that you really want access to is likely going to help you quite a bit. If you really need something, even just if to set up for another shot after it, this particular orb has some really solid, again, utility. Unfortunately, like I said, it requires you to hit a crit to hit every enemy on the screen, so it kind of takes away from its ability to be the top dog when it comes to the area of effect orbs. We get to light that bomb, it's going to come down. Right now, it doesn't matter, obviously, if we hit a crit because we're only facing 2 enemies anyway, but as you can see, 30 points of damage. This next throw is where it's really going to matter. Like, can we hit the crit here, right? Because, well, actually, it still doesn't matter because we're still not there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually chuck this out over here. I don't actually want to hit anything right now, so we can see now that there's another blob coming in, right? We're going to be able to guarantee hitting this crit no matter what, right? Like, we could hit this crit, we could come back up, we could actually hit this peg right here and make it bounce up, which is probably the better play right now because we want it to bounce around more up here. And that's probably what we're going to go with. If you can see right here, we could actually hit this one all the way down here, but is that the right play? Probably not, just based off of how this game works with its physics and everything. You want to be able to make sure that your orb stays up top a little bit longer so you have the opportunity to hit more pegs as it goes down. You have to crit to actually do damage to everything, can be, again, a little bit detrimental to this peg. Now, obviously, if this was a higher level of the Icircle, we'd be getting a ton of damage out of this. We would be getting an absolute ton of damage. We even still got the refresh. We're still doing a fair amount of damage here. Everything's going to die between the bomb and the Icircle. Very good orb, but is it going to be the ball that you absolutely positively want to use in all cases? I don't think so. I think that this one is more of a situational kind of AoE orb that early on in your climb through the crucibles can be very effective, but it will definitely lose some of its effectiveness as you make progress. Now, can you still make it effective at higher levels of crucible? Of course you can, but again, it's all going to come down to whether or not you can find the critable, whether or not you can find relics that actually augment it, and so on and so forth. Still a very good orb, still one you might want to use occasionally, but definitely one that isn't going to be as useful as you make progress in the game without a little bit of help. So the next orb we're going to take a look at is the Sphere, one of the more recently added balls to the game on one of their more recent updates. How good is it? Is it something you might want a lot of, or is it something that you might just want to be heh on? Now, what is the Sphere and how good is it? The Sphere was an orb that they recently actually added to the game to give you a little bit more play when it comes to area of effect. So this is definitely kind of the jack of all trades area of effect orb. This is the one that in a lot of cases it has a place in your deck just simply based off of the fact that there's nothing really that special about it, but there aren't any really big negatives to it either. The basic Sphere, same damage as the Icircle, 2/4, attacks pierce one enemy. Now what does that mean? The same thing that we saw on the Icircle. So that means if we throw this orb right now, we're going to be able to hit this spider, we're going to be able to hit this slime. Is that good? Of course it is. We don't have to worry about anything else. We just toss it, forget about it, maybe try to get a crit, get some extra damage. Is it really necessary? Not really. Now, here's where the Sphere starts to shine a little bit more as you upgrade it. We're looking at the second level of the Sphere. 3 on a regular, 5 on a crit, attacks pierce 2 enemies. Now, you can already see that the damage drop-off is occurring. If we had this on the Icircle, for example, this would be a 3/6. So already, if we hit crit, pegs are going to be worth 1 less damage. Now, how big of a deal is this? It could be pretty big, depending on what you're looking at. Obviously, you never know when you're going to need that extra damage, especially as you make progress up and through this game. More damage, usually always better actually, especially when the health pools of enemies start increasing as much as they do as you make progress through the crucibles. The addition of the piercing 2 enemies is definitely one of its bigger points here. Now this is where it's starting to outshine the Icircle. So if we had 3 enemies down here, if let's say this spider right here was actually down here, that means we would hit all of them. And that's one of the biggest selling points here. Getting as much bang for your buck, as they say in the business, right? You want to make sure that the damage that you do with this bad boy is going to get spread across as many enemies as possible. Again, it might be getting outclassed a little bit by damage of the Icircle, but it also doesn't have to rely on crits. I think that that is something that is incredibly important as you make progress. And again, like we've already stated, you start seeing a lot less crits on the board as you make progress through the crucibles. We're going to see it actually improves a little bit more as you get to level 3. 4 on a regular hit, just like an Icircle. 6 on a crit, 2 less damage than that, but it's not required to actually get the crit to pierce through a lot of enemies. What we're seeing right now is that this pierces through 3 enemies. So if we had all 4 of the current enemy set on the ground, we would hit all of them, whether or not we hit a crit. Getting as much damage across as many enemies as possible, as often as possible, is only going to help your survival rate and only going to benefit you as you're trying to beat each and every one of these. How good is the sphere? Again, it's pretty good. I think that this is one of the more solid orbs in the game, just based off of the fact that it has some really nice damage just for upgrading it regularly, even without the crit. But the fact that you can actually pierce enemies without that crit is pretty nice. Not to mention it can hit air enemies. Obviously, this would shine better if you had the relic that allowed you to hit everything in a straight line, because if we were to say, actually, we'll do it right now. Let's say we were to target the bat. We're going to target the bat on our first throw, and we'll actually see this in action. We're getting really nice damage out of this. It's level 2, obviously. This is something that you're not going to have this early in the game, but that's okay. We did this all. Again, shout out to the Thunderstorm mod manager for allowing us to do this. But you can see, well, actually, I take it back. We actually did get value out of that because they were packed up the way they were. So I'm going to recant that statement, and I forgot that you can occasionally do that sometimes. Let's say, for example, though, we would have fired at this spider here, if it would have been the spider here and the bat back here, that would have actually hit at an angle where it didn't actually hit the bat behind it. There are aiming possibilities with the sphere or other orbs that might pierce, like the Icircle for flying enemies, but it's not as consistent as if you'd use them on the bottom. So we're actually going to skip the level 1, and we're going to see how nice it is to actually be able to hit every enemy right here. We're going to just target the bottom because we know we're going to get more bang for the buck here, and we're going to fire off this level 3 sphere, and we're going to see that we're going to do probably what's going to be quite a bit of damage, even without getting the bomb. 2 of them wiped out, the slime's almost dead. The sphere is doing very solid work. What are the detriments to the sphere? Nothing really. I'm going to be 100% honest with you. I don't really think that there's a whole lot of there's nothing negative about it. Now, is it going to be the orb that carries you to victory? Probably not. But it's definitely not going to be the one that causes you to lose either. It's a good solid orb. It's one that can be put to very good use. It's only going to get better if you find some other things to augment it, whether it would be the Poltorbgeist for extra damage, or again, finding the grabby hand, I believe is what it's called, so you can hit all of the enemies that are on the 2nd level. Again, Peglin currently doesn't have that many enemies that are flying, so it's not really that much of a concern, even as you make progress. But it's something to think about here and there. This is still a very good orb. So again, the only real cons, kind of mediocre upgrade damage, but the benefits almost always outweigh the actual drawbacks when it comes to the sphere. We're going to get on to our last orb now. One of my personal favorites, but also one of the more riskier prospects in the game, the Ohmygorb. The Ohmygorb. What's so good about it? What might be bad about it? Let's start with what's good and take a really quick look at the 3 different levels of it. Level 1, Ohmygorb. 5 damage on regular pegs, 9 on crits. 2nd level, Ohmygorb. 7 on regular hits, 11 on crits. 3rd level, Ohmygorb. 9 damage on regular pegs and 13 on crits. This orb is a powerhouse. This orb could potentially carry you through the first 4 levels of Crucible, hands down on its own. And the reason being is that things aren't really that hefty when it comes to their HP pool. So going into a run or going into a fight, baiting out as many of the enemies as possible and just chucking this bad boy is honestly a worthwhile strategy. That is going to change as you make progress in the game, but let's go ahead and talk again about why this is so good. Its damage potential is absolutely through the roof. We're going to throw our level 2 here in a second, and there's a very good chance that we might kill all 4 of these enemies currently on the board with that one slime yet to come back, right? It attacks all enemies, whether they're flying, whether they're walking, it doesn't matter. This thing's going to hit it, and it is absolutely positively going to ruin their goddamn day. So let's throw it. Let's see what we get. We're already at 50 points of damage. These things are all dead in one swipe. This is why this orb can carry you through the first few levels of Crucible. Here we go. Bye, everybody. Everything is reduced to rubble. I think a lot of players in the game currently might be afraid to use this. Obviously, you can see why. We have a big swath of pegs that are just completely eliminated from the board now. Now, this is where we need to talk about what are the negatives. Well, exactly that. You don't want to basically find yourself in a fight where you're like, oh, I'm just going to throw this and I'm going to kill everybody. Later levels of Crucible take a little bit more finesse. You're not going to want to throw this one right away. You're going to want to maybe take out a few enemies with regular orbs right away until you know that most of the enemies are actually on the actual board, and then throw this and then finish them off with other orbs. This isn't one that you walk into and just say, I'm going to throw it all day, every day, and get away with it. This orb is not designed for that. It is a very, very, very awesome tool in your arsenal, especially if you start finding anything that increases its damage. You find anything that increases crit damage or regular damage again. This is going to carry you through a lot of the game. Even though it's going to be helpful even at later stages, one of the things you need to remember if you decide to rely on this orb at higher Crucibles is that it's going to be way less effective against some of the major bosses. Some of the major bosses have incredibly large health pools at Crucible 7. You're looking at over 8,000 hit points on the final boss of the game alone, over 9,000 hit points on the wall boss of the second area. So this is essentially a dead weight in your build when you get to those bosses, unless you're in a position of, okay, I might be able to finish this thing off, now I can toss this thing with its massive damage. And the reason that is because if you use it early, you're eliminating your damage over time, right? There's no way that you're going to get through some of the bosses in this game within a few rounds. When getting this, make sure that you know what you're getting into and make sure that you build your deck around it. Which also leads me to the fact that you need to have discard with this particular orb. You are not going to be able to get along without any discard on this bad boy, so if you see Sealed Conviction and you want to pick it up, you better have the Ambidextionary, the one that gives you 2 discards. If you find yourself starting a fight with this bad boy, and it's the first orb that you have to toss, and you don't have a way to discard it, in the later Crucibles, you are going to be in a lot of trouble. Which one of these balls is best? Which one of them is worst? And how would Professor Peglin actually rank them? Well, let's go ahead and get to it right now. I brought them all up here. You can see we have each one of them at level 3. Let's take a look at what they are doing and why I'm going to rank them where I'm at. We got the Bouldorb maxed out 4.8. We've got the Poltorbgeist maxed out 3.5. We've got the Ohmygorb maxed out 9.13. We've got the Sphere maxed out 4.6. We have got the Icircle maxed out 4.8. Where do we start? Drum roll, please. Number 5, the one I'm currently on, the Icircle. The Icircle is probably one of the least useful of the crew, and I went over it a little bit when we were talking about it, but the Icircle is definitely an awesome utility orb. It can definitely be used in a lot of your decks, but I don't think it's the one that you should rely on for the most bang for your buck. And again, as you make progress through the Crucibles, it all comes down to the fact that you need to hit a crit to actually make it pierce through all of the enemies. It definitely loses a lot of its usefulness there. Now, is the fact that it can pierce through one of the first peg that it hits to hit something behind it very useful later on? For sure. It's definitely something that you can put to use in other decks in later Crucible levels of Peglin. Getting to that refresh, getting to that crit, getting to that bomb that may have had a peg come over it that was lit, and you really need that bomb to go off, so you're going to pierce through that peg that's blocking it to get it. It still has utility, but it's still not nearly as good as the other ones, almost across the board, just based off of the fact that you have to hit that crit to make sure you hit them all. Who takes the number 4 spot? Well, the one we're getting ready to pitch right now, guys, the Bouldorb. The Bouldorb is very heavy. It doesn't bounce nearly as well as the other orbs. If there is an orb over here, or let's say over here that we want to hit, we're just not going to be able to hit it with the Bouldorb, right? There's no way for us to chuck it. If our refresh was over here and we really needed that, this is just taking up space. We can't hit it. Now, it does great damage. If we get a crit, it's doing 8 points of damage per peg hit across all of those ground enemies. But not being able to hit air and not being able to hit stuff that we might want to hit when the chips are really down and on the table, that's why this one kind of cruises into the number 4 spot. Why is the Sphere number 3? I feel like the pros outweigh the cons of the Sphere pretty heavily. Even though it doesn't get as much damage from its upgrades, even though it's not really anything special, when you finally do get it to that level 3 though, being able to pierce through 3 enemies and hit 4 targets is a pretty big deal. Being able to hit things on the board just like we would with any other orb. So that we can see that the Poltorbgeist, this is what this thing's fire is, right? The sphere would have the same fire arc. So we know that with the sphere, if our refresh was over here, unlike the Bouldorb, if it was the Bouldorb, we'd be screwed. If it's the sphere, it'd be the exact same thing as the Poltorbgeist here. It would be able to get that refresher crit. It would be able to do more damage. This is the jack of all trades area of effect orb, as it were. That's why it's in number 3. Because again, is it going to win you the game sometimes? It might. But I think that the other 2 orbs that we're going to get to here in a moment are the ones that have way more potential in winning you the game ultimately than this one. Number 4, probably the biggest surprise. Probably the biggest surprise considering what we've talked about earlier. Number 4 is actually going to be Ohmygorb, really, really close to taking the top spot. Really close. Just simply based off of its damage potential and how much it can carry you through early game Peglin. Why doesn't it get the top spot? Destroying those pegs hurts. If you cannot discard this orb, it is going to hurt you way more than it is going to help you. Those are the reasons that it occupies number 2. If it had maybe a little bit more play in it, I think we would definitely know this is the guaranteed number 1. But again, the very significant drawback of destroying those pegs and it actually ruining a run for you if you use it too early in a fight are the biggest reasons it takes you to number 2. Last, certainly not least, but absolutely what I consider the best area of effect orb in the game is the one that we have loaded up right now, the Poltorbgeist. Does it do a whole lot of damage? No, we've talked about it already. Lowest damage potential of all of them right here, right? But the big deal is that it hits everything, and the other big deal is this right here, the passes through the pegs while traveling upwards. This is easily, in my estimation, one of the biggest final boss killers in Peglin of the game. Not only do you hit all 4 of the boss parts with this orb, but being able to travel up and through is a very big deal for the final boss. If you've been there, there are 4 big chunks of pegs that you can actually hit to do damage. They rotate. Yeah, I know, spoiler alert, but if you're here watching this, you're probably okay with spoilers anyway. What the hell are you gonna do? So as you see those rotate around, there are gonna be moments where you may not be able to get to a reload that you really want. As you see them rotate around the screen, you're going to be able to actually use that to your advantage. And let's say, you know, we see the one right here, we're just going to have to imagine it, that there was one of those big block of pegs right there, and there was a refresh. You just aim up, you wait for it, even wait for it to cycle around a couple times so you can see that you're going to hit it when you fire it. And as soon as it gets into position, you fire this orb, you get your refresh, or you get your crit, or you get the bombs that are associated with it, and you absolutely positively get way ahead of the game. That is one of the reasons, one of the biggest reasons I'm ranking the Poltorbgeist as the number 1 area of effect orb. That's what we have for today, folks. AoE and you and Peglin. I hope that you all learned something today. I hope that it actually helps you in your progress in Peglin. If you have any questions, make sure that you put them in the comments below. If you enjoyed what I'm teaching, if you enjoyed how I presented all this, like, subscribe, give me those comments, give me other things that you might want to know about Peglin, other questions, other things you'd like to see in action. I would love to sit down and go over it to try to help all of you out. So I hope to see you next time. Professor Peglin, also known as Old Man Sethis, is out. Have a wonderful day. Thanks again for watching, everybody. Be sure to leave your comments below, like and subscribe, and we'll definitely see you again soon. A huge shout out to my Patreons who continue to make this possible.